Welcome to Situation Preparedness here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We're on live show on Blog Talk Radio, but you can catch us all the time at usaebn.org. My name is Andre. I'll be your host this week for Situation Preparedness, or what we call it on the interwebs, because it takes less letters primarily, and it sounds a little cool, but not really. What we do here is talk about different situations, obviously, that you would be in, kind of like a play on situational awareness, but with a preparedness mindset. What we also do on this show is we invite other experts, partners, preparedness people, and people of like minds on this show to share knowledge about things that are going on in the world. And one of those folks that we've had on this show, and been a regular guest, talking about earth changes, and most recently about a 3,600-year cycle of cataclysms. Nancy from Wisconsin, I'd like to welcome her back to the show. Welcome back, Nancy.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here, Andre.
Oh, glad to have you. And just to recap, we've had you on the show before talking about information from your websites, zetatalk.com and poleshift.ning.com. But on our most recent show, I want to just backtrack just a bit. We were talking about the 3,600-year cycles of major cataclysms and earth changes, possibly crustal pole shift in our history geologically, and from what we see from history itself and what written history. So just to bring folks back up to speed, did you want to add anything to that from last month's show?
Yes, we talked about the 3,600-year signature, which shows up so much in geology and mythology and the like. And at that time, I think we touched briefly on the fact that the ancient Sumerians, the ancient Babylonians, had that in their Sumerian texts. They were very heavily emphasized 3,600-year orbit of what some might call a mythological planet called Nibiru, which they called Nibiru. And this was all deciphered by Zechariah Sitchin, translated, and wrote many books, which he called The 12th Planet and The Return of the Gods. And I'm not sure what all his books were called, but he wrote a number of books about what he found in the Babylonian texts. And the reason that the ancient Babylonians called that the 12th planet was because they counted the moon and the sun as planets. We think of our solar system as having 10 planets. Well, that was the case when Pluto was called a planet.
Pluto. Yeah.
9, and which they apparently, and they were surprisingly aware of Pluto way back then. Way before Christ, eons ago, where we were only aware of it since like 1930 or so by telescope, by observatories.
Okay.
And they counted the planets in from the outside in toward the sun, where we count them out, Mercury, right, Venus, Earth, etc. So they seem to have an unusual amount of astronomical information, which is, in the first place, should raise an eyebrow. How significant were the ancient Sumerians or the Babylonians? We could dismiss it and say, a bunch of hieroglyphics, a bunch of pictures, and etc. Maybe Zechariah Sitchin was all wet. What did he know? And you could take it a lot. In other words, questioning the translations. But the interesting thing is, 3,600 appears forever, in their texts. Where do you think we get our 360 from?
Right.
The horizon around? True north is 0, true south is 180, and when we come around it's 360. Well, the ancient Sumerians even had a term for 3,600. They called it the Shar, S-H-A-R. And it really forms the basis of our modern astronomy, where we say the sun comes up at 90 degrees east and sets at 270 west and blah, blah, blah. And where are we to find the constellations? We measure this by what is known as the azimuth, A-Z-I-M-U-T-H, which is going around the circle, around the horizon, etc. And that's how significant this information coming from the ancient Sumerians was. So that should tie in the 3,600 year signature of cataclysms with a traveling planet called Nibiru. Now that's hitting the search engines a lot, and the internet. It's going viral. You go to the conspiracy forums, you look, and you find that you type in Nibiru, Nibiru, and everybody and his brother has a theory about it. Is it back? Is it going to come through? Is it related to what's termed the end times? Oh, did they catch it on film? Etc. There was something recently that kind of went viral about Google Earth or Google Sky. Supposedly had covered up someplace and put a big black box over what had been a red orb, which people are saying, oh, that was Nibiru. And it disappeared, and this was in 2008. They discovered that the black box was replacing something that had appeared briefly in 2008. Now, Google Sky, I think, was only formulated around 2007, 8, right around that time, and it was formulated from images that were collected over the decades, but primarily from the two mass images, which 99.99% of the sky had been imaged by this technique in approximately 1997 to 2001. But also, Google Sky was incorporating old Palomar sky charts and other older sky charts. So it's most likely.
Just to clarify that, and then sorry to interrupt, but on the Google Sky imaging, not even talking about the black box at this time, it's not like Google Earth or Google Street, where they went through the streets and took 360-degree laser photographs or photographs of the area. They didn't just point those things at the sky and take a picture of the sky and say, we think things are here from our imaging. They used wide area search, WISE survey, I believe, was a big part of Google Sky's coordinates, at least. I mean, they can add in pictures and stuff like that, but I think it was the WISE program, wasn't it, that they based a lot of their...
Yes, and they basically the very base was 2 MASS, and that stands for something. And I'm not sure off the top of my head what it does stand for, but they updated it with more recent imaging, which is WISE, WISE, which also stands for something. It doesn't mean it's a WISE program. It means And yes, but when it first came out, when Google Sky first came out, I think the whole base or floor or foundation was the 2 MASS or older, imaging that was done, and it was this object that was showing up very briefly was out near Orion, just a little bit below Orion, and supposedly Nibiru hoves inbound to our solar system from Orion. That's the ancients talking, right? Comes from the direction of Orion, blah, blah, blah. So
what they wrote down.
Yeah. And so this raised a bit of a furor. Now there was this black box, and you can see that. You can go there to those coordinates now and take a look, and there's that black box. So what are they hiding? Well, recently this went viral on the Internet again as a result of a hoax, which was an image which is another place in the sky, up higher, up above the ecliptic, plus 22, and there is an existing star system that is kind of orange and has a swirling mass around it, and they said, oh, look, Nibiru. It's no longer being covered up, and Google Sky is no longer covering it up with a black box. Tricked a lot of people until you realize that the coordinates are not the same. The 2008 image was below, close to Orion, and this other one was up above, well above, and that's not the same. And I did a little investigation, and I found out that the one that the most recent viral video was about has been in the star charts all the way back to 1951. You can go back, and there it is, and there it is. It's just an existing star system. So, but nevertheless, it got out there and stirred the pot. What about Nibiru? Is Nibiru coming back? Is it there, etc.? And so it's very much a popular buzz on the internet. Yes. So the ancients. Yeah, pardon me.
I was just going to say that sometimes when some of these, it wasn't. I don't know if it was a leak or not. This most recent Google Sky Furor that you're talking about the black box being lifted, and that possibly being a sign that there's more to come about possibly more evidence of this planet that we've known about, or it has been written about for, the 3,600-year signatures that we were talking about. But then you get on some of these websites, and I won't name them, but we all know who they are, that they like to get more traffic to their website by posting bombastic and loud headlines, much like they used to do with the extras on newspapers back in the day. It's just a way to make money, and it's hard to cut through that. And we talk about it here. It's like research everything before you believe anything. It's like dig down on it,
right.
And that's why we like having you on the show. Is you can provide some of that perspective for us. There was a hoax there for a minute, and then it came. Then the actual information is out there. You have to dig for it, though.
Yeah, it caught me until the first time I looked at that, I didn't even notice that the coordinates were different. I was so excited because it looks similar. It had a swirl on either side, like you might call them wings, Now, why is that important? Well, the ancient Babylonians had a depiction for Nibiru, which they called a traveling planet, that is part of our solar system, but instead of going round and around and hanging around like all the planets are on a string that's connected to the sun and just being swung around, this one has a very odd orbit according to the ancient Babylonians and goes way afar, and then it comes through every 3,600 years on this peculiar orbit and slings back out again. So, and causing much destruction when it does, which is why we had the 3,600-year signature of, oops, the ice ages and all the, Pangea pulls apart and whatever. So they had a depiction for this planet, which was a winged globe. There's the globe, and these wings stretch out on either side like an albatross, huge wings, right? And the planet itself was just depicted as a round circle in the center there, the winged globe, and you can find that on ancient Summerian documentation. Well, people have been looking, in the skies, especially because our weather has gotten weird and our storm systems, and we're going to get into all that, things that keep getting worse and worse, like earthquakes. But in 2009, people who are SOHO watchers, for our listeners who don't know what SOHO is, they are satellites deployed by NASA that are Earth. They float up there between the Earth and the Sun, pretty close to the Earth, and they kind of go back and forth. They have a certain orbit that allows them to, but they never take off. They're in a fixed position, sun side up above the Earth, and they take images of the sun itself, and the sky surrounding the sun, and they take it in different light spectrums. I'm not an expert on this, but there's the blue image, the red image, and all the and close images of the sun and X-ray, and I'm not sure what all, but they have an array of offerings, but somebody noticed on the image that is provided to the public in the blue format that the winged globe was showing up. It didn't in one frame. In the next frame, because every 20 minutes you'd get another refresh, the next one, there it was, and the next one, it was gone again. But it was remarkable because it was literally the winged globe from the ancient Sumerians on the SOHO image. Now, the SOHO images have a lot of evidence that they are being doctored, that there's a cover-up, that they're being airbrushed. And people talk about, NASA is not telling us the truth about the face on Mars, and UFOs are zipping by the International Space Station, and et cetera, et cetera. It's always, take it with a grain of salt what NASA tells you. But why would there be a cover-up on this issue? Because if you're going to have great destruction on Earth, you don't want to be casual about that, right? You don't want to say, well, have fun on your Disney vacation, and by the way, ISIS is due to attack. You don't want to panic people unnecessarily. So there's all this, well, we don't know for sure. Let's wait till we're sure. Let's wait till we have something concrete, and that would be the justification for a cover-up. Don't panic the people, right? So what you can see when you look at SOHO images is you can see cut and paste. You can see edit lines where this part is kind of a lighter blue, and then all of a sudden it's like a clean line coming down top to bottom, and it's darker blue or whatever. So you can write programs, and having been in the computer industry, I'm sure that this is a nothing kind of a thing, programs that would say, for this quadrant of the images, replace whatever is there with this other thing. Airbrush it out, do a cut and paste, whatever, and maybe things moved around a little bit, or the program hiccuped and didn't do the cut and paste right, and something got through. But it's remarkable, and I do have that on my website. It's a 2009 SOHO image of a winged globe. Curious? Yes. Just another sign that maybe Nibiru is coming through, and there's a cover-up, something to think about.
Right.
So now, the real kingpin of the conspiracy theories is a 1983 article that appeared on the front page of the Washington Post. And I have that article on my website also, and it's out and about on the Internet. You can type in, 1983 Planet X, Washington Post. I'm sure you'll find it in a flash, because it's... Well, I actually, when I was reading about this, way back in, I think it was the early 1990s, and somebody, suggested I read Zechariah Sitchin and Velikovsky. Velikovsky, of course, wrote about mythology and the geological record, and Zechariah Sitchin wrote about the ancient Sumerians' talk about Nibiru. And I was digging into all of that, and when I read about the 1983 article, I couldn't find it in print anywhere. So I went to the library. It was in California at the time, and in the Berkeley Library, in the microfiche, there it was.
Microfilm or microfiche?
I believe it was.
That takes me back a bit.
Yeah, I think it was. It was on a roll, so that makes
Right.
it film, right? Rather, the fiche is the. I believe it was. In any case, I got a print off of that and typed it up for my website, etc., and confirmed to myself. There it was. It's toward the bottom of the front page. It's not headlined up on top, but it is the front page. It's way on the bottom, and it says the NASA/JPL. Sent up an infrared balloon into the upper atmosphere. Why infrared and why the upper atmosphere? Well, this is a planet that generates its own heat, per legend, right? Generates its own heat, and therefore it would show up in infrared. It's also rumored to be a red planet, meaning... and has a lot of red dust around it, which is supposedly the reason that some places on our planet we have red clay soil, like the outback of Australia, like the red clay in the southeast. There's various places on Earth where, for unexplained reasons, we have iron oxide dust mixed in with the soil and kept there because of its clay and doesn't just wash away. So so this is the reason, for instance, that the Jewish Exodus had Moses dip his staff down into the water and turn it blood red. And, you know, the stories are all depicting Moses as invoking God to come and punish the Egyptians for their slavery of the Jews and the like. But another way of looking at it is he was just an opportunist. And he knew that this planet had returned, and he was, rattling Pharaoh's cage. Let us go, or this horrible stuff will happen. And then, of course, the horrible stuff happened. It was a plague of frogs, and there were earthquakes, and that big volcano in the Mediterranean in Greece, Thera, which is now Santorini, blew up, and blah, blah, blah. So, in any case, the red dust accompanies Nibiru per legend and per physical evidence, on our Earth. So when they found this planet up there near Orion, coming in, from Orion, or at least that's where they located it, they were so discombobulated that they reported it, and allowed and then right away they scrambled forth and said, we were wrong, forget, what, reset, no. Well, the years before 1983, they were out there looking for what was called in those days nemesis, and it was some sort of a presence that the astronomers all the way back, through the Dark Ages and then back, said there is some reason that the outer planets lean in the direction of Orion. They lean that way. And recently there's been astronomers pronouncing that our long period comets, that's those that go away for a while and years pass and then they come back through again, but they're repeaters. They all seem to hove out toward Orion, and they come in from the direction of Orion. And likewise, the outer planets, they all perturb or lean or pull in that direction. Well, what's out there? What's the gravity pull that's causing that? And this thing that was causing that was termed nemesis, which of course means death and destruction, I guess. And in 1983, and they were looking for it in 1980, 81, 82, and I found all this information out there, old magazines that were talking about the search for nemesis, who was looking, etc. So this whole thing about leaning out toward Orion was real. But when the cover-up, after they found it, and after this 1983 article in Washington Post on the front page, all of a sudden they came out and said, oh, never mind, it was a math error. We made a mistake with our math. And,
the old nothing to see here approach?
Nothing to see here. We just, we forgot to carry the 2, oh dear. Okay. So all of this stuff about perturbing and pulling out toward, never mind, and it's been going on ever since, the cover up, and I'm not sure what's going to happen, there, but more and more people are seeing something in the sky, and then we have all the weird stuff that's going on, with the Earth and the weather. Now, what about earthquake injuries?
Nancy?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a caller, Tim from Usaebn.
Hey.
Okay, we'll bring him live right now. Hey, Tim.
Yeah, Tim.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Yeah, we're doing good. Yeah, we're scratching our heads.
I've got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
I saw one in the chat room about what is this planet that we're talking about, and I think you've been doing real good on explaining it.
Yeah.
But can you explain a little bit more? I'm under the impression, what does it mean to us? I mean, is this planet going to be coming towards us? because of some problems? What's the gist here?
Well, the gist is it's a big bugger. It's bigger than we are, and it's apparently magnetic also. We've been having a lot of problems with our magnetosphere funny stuff, where and it is on occasion we'll get electromagnetic pulse, is that type of interference, static on the radio, I can't get my cable in or whatever. So it's supposedly a magnetic planet. If it is coming toward us, it's considered a passage, because the ancients said they could see it in the sky. They could see something writhing, and then the earthquakes and the volcanoes blew up and blah blah blah, and then it went away. Well, why doesn't it hit us? Well, there seems to be some sort of a force. In fact, the moon should have crashed to Earth a long time ago. There's something that mankind does not have in their calculations, but in fact their calculations aren't that precise. I mean, the bumblebee is not supposed to be able to fly. I did an exercise once in 1997 with astronomers on SciAstro about how our math regarding gravity and planets and interactions is not right. And I said the moon should not be up there. It is too heavy and moving too slowly. You can have an object at the end of a string, and if you swing around and around and around, you can keep that object away from you and moving and off the ground. The centrifugal force has an effect.
Right.
But our moon goes around every 28 days. That's pokey. In fact, a Concorde jet, it goes faster than the moon, and it has to go faster in order to stay up there. So, and the moon is huge. So they say, oh no, you type in mass, you put in mass in the calculator. I said, well, let's use something real, like granite. Granite has a certain weight. Let's make this real. Let's say that it's granite, and what is its size, and how much weight is that? And it turned out that if you had 23 million trillion tons of granite 6 inches above the ground, moving so slow that it would, practically a speeding car would be faster, going around the Earth. That's the moon. And when it was presented that way, these guys got huffy, red-faced, and marched off and said, burp, 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 burp. Because there is something that prevents big planets from crashing into each other. They just don't. And Nibiru has come through, and it's visible, and making a passage. It does not crack into the Earth. It causes the Earth to have earthquakes and the like, and adjust. But according to legend, it doesn't crack into the Earth, and I don't think it will this time either.
So now I'm going to actually dumbfound Andre on this one. I believe in the space aliens. I've seen them. I've had my experience with them. I was part of the Phoenix Lights. So I know there's something up there. And I know the government does not know what they're talking about. Okay? I'll give you that, and I completely understand. Their job is not to cause panic, so they'll say whatever they can, is not to cause panic and save the economy. But, and to give you an example of that, was during the moon landings, they were prepared for, I think they said 18 inches of moon dust when they only had 6. So, I mean, they don't know, and especially when you go out into outer space and astronomy and all, no one really knows the truth out there. And I think you're correct. There is something that, keeps us from crashing into other things. I've always been under the impression with our magnetic field, but we have to have a huge iron core in order for that to happen. And I don't think the Earth doesn't have that, And that's what, keeps the moon spinning and all that kind of stuff. So I think you're correct. There is something out there that they're not talking about, and they don't know because they don't know why. They don't know.
Right.
They're looking for the answers just as we are.
Yes.
And the curiosity I got is because listening to you speak, I'm first thing I start thinking about is the Aztec thing in 2012.
Right.
Okay, so
the Mayans.
They were off. Yeah, the Mayans. I'm sorry. they were off. And then I hear you're talking about 39 years, and you do have proof, and you have a reason for it. But I'm wondering now, is this something we don't know? We're trying to put something towards it, or, can we pretty much start thinking, okay, look, if something's going to happen here, and when is the 3,900 year time frame?
Yeah.
Or am I off on this?
Well, we don't really know. We don't know. There's evidence that it has returned because people are seeing something in the sky. Sometimes they see two sunrises and two sunsets, and it's actually something brilliant. And I'm not talking about sundogs. Sundogs are well documented. You can't. There's like a halo around the sun, and right, left, and top. You can have this thing that's kind of rainbowish. That's a sundog, and it's but they can see it, and they think there's two suns rising, and then that first one went away, and then same with sunset. At that time, and there's enough going on like that where people and amateur astronomers, etc., are seeing something, and they say, well, we think Nibiru is back, but nobody knows what, there is no calendar, there is no timeline as to what are we talking about, how many years, months, etc. It's a slow-moving process. Our weather and earthquakes and the like keep getting worse and worse, and which makes you wonder, and I can talk about an earth wobble too, which is documentable, where and I'm not talking about this 26,000 year thingy that's shamp or wobble or something. It's a daily thing where the sun doesn't necessarily rise or set in the right place. For instance, I got something from Sweden the other day, and a woman said, here, webcam. This webcam is pointing north. She's in a part of Sweden that's right on the Bering, right by Denmark. They're on the water. And their sun was scheduled to come up at 4:09, and what they were taking in this webcam was well beyond civil dawn, which is supposed to be the light that you see the hour before dawn or the hour after sunset. That's civil twilight, and it was beyond that at 1 o'clock at night, so 3 hours early, and this, people, and I got some more reports from other people over there. I asked, I said, you live in Denmark, blah, blah, blah. Yes, at 1:32 o'clock, way too light. It's like the sun is about to come up. This type of thing, where you can actually document where your sun comes up, where it goes down, and so something out there is pushing our North Pole and then letting it bounce back and twisting the Earth around. I began documenting this for some years with a team around the globe and saying, what's the azimuth where your sun rises or sunsets, and how high is the sun in the dome? At 90 degrees, or is it 87, south, or blah, blah, blah. And these people all over the globe, and it forms a figure eight, and it's still forming a figure eight. So this is like a regular thing, which is not in the media. Nobody talks about it, but people notice this. And I say, my grandmother says the moon never shone in that window. She's lived here all her life. She's 86 years old. The moon never shone in that window, and yet it does now, and that type of thing. So something's going on. Now, yes, it is rumored to be about 4 or 5 times larger than the Earth. After 1983, there was a famous astronomer, Harrington, who felt the people should know. And this is the story on him, and I guess there's enough out there that this is not just a myth. And he said he's going to New Zealand with an observatory, with a scope, and he's going to take pictures of this thing, that they had seen and that appeared on the Washington Post front page, and tell the public about it. Oh, pretty soon he was dead, right?
Yes.
And they dragged back he claimed that this was 5 times bigger than Earth. The planet was 5 times bigger than Earth. So it is larger. It's the bully. If it's magnetic like the Earth, it's a magnetic bully. And you put 2 magnets together, their north poles don't want to touch. The big one is going to move the little one.
Well, that's the same relationship we have with Jupiter right now. Jupiter's the bully of our solar system.
Yeah.
And keeps all the asteroids and all that kind of stuff in place.
Yes.
Between Mars and Jupiter.
I've got an interesting anomaly about Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, the last 5 or 6 days, there's been a scheduled conjunction that's happened, rumored to be the same kind of conjunction that happens on a regular cycle 2,000 years, where Mars is visible, Venus is visible, and Jupiter is visible. It's well documented. Some great shots around the world the past 5 or 6 days. I think you've seen some, Nancy. And also the moon was involved early in the conjunction. But those two planets come close together and form one type of light that is very bright. So these are a regular conjunction. What I've noticed by my amateur astronomy, and this is my own personal account, not any kind of documentation other than photos and directions that I'm taking the photos, Venus has been in our western sky for quite some time, visible in our western sky. Nancy, have you had any reports of that as well? Have you not noticed that? And Venus is in a retrograde orbit, which means it goes counterclockwise in the spin, where all the other planets are going clockwise. So Venus should zip past us at a very high clip, several times, because it's close to the sun. Its orbit is tighter. But it's been in the western sky, and I'm like, that's Venus, that's Venus. 5 days later, that's Venus. And then this conjunction, the last 5 days, I've been looking in that direction. And they all line up like they should, but Venus stays in the same place.
Yes. I've heard some, and people have taken photos. There was one from South Africa, and somebody didn't know what that was, and it was like a big orange blob, like the blob from outer space, as big as the moon, but the moon was nowhere in sight, at that time. And I think there was a matching pink blob from somewhere else, and it's Venus. It's where Venus should be, or thereabouts, and too large and oddly reflecting light in a way that Venus is supposed to be our evening or morning star, not a big blob the size of the moon. So there's something going on with Venus, but you have to think if Nibiru has returned and it's slinging past the sun or coming in our direction, it's going to interfere with Venus. Venus is going to be if we have a figure-8 wobble and Venus is being pushed around, it's either reflecting light weird or it's being temporarily pushed in the wrong place, perhaps even too close to us, and this would, not that it's going to crash into us, because from what I understand, this doesn't happen. Planets do not wang, they stay at an arm's distance. Gravity is very poorly understood. It's a particle flow. And if you look at magnetics, we have it flowing out the North Pole, circling around and coming in the South Pole, and it's all pretty well understood. And that particle flow is powerful. You cannot get the North Pole of two magnets to touch each other. It's like break your arm trying, right? And it won't happen. But that's how powerful that particle flow is. Well, gravity is a particle flow, too. It's poorly understood. It's not a magical force. It drifts down slowly. But what's this with the Devil's Triangle in the Caribbean and the like, where things seemed, something switches to another dimension and planes and boats just disappear? Well, something's going on with gravity where it shoots out from the core of the Earth very rapidly, and then it turns around and drifts slowly down. Well, if you have two large hunky things like the Moon and the Earth, or two planets, and they're both shooting gravity particles out at a rapid pace, that's like two fire hoses pointing at each other, and they're not going to allow those fire hoses to come and touch. And that's what I think is going on with gravity and what keeps these big planets apart. So there are mysteries and mysteries, but we haven't solved the Devil's Triangle, or where the Edmund Fitzgerald went up in the deep waters of the Lake Superior, and so that's one possible explanation for why planets don't whack into each other.
Let me ask you a question, and I'm ignorant on this part. I've done a little research, not as much as I should have, but it was brought to my attention about a year ago that we take for granted we circle the sun. We're spinning and we're circling the sun at the same time, and all the other planets are doing that, whether clockwise or counterclockwise. Now, someone had maybe done a little research saying that the sun itself is also moving.
Yes.
Through space. Could this be man, this is where my mind starts to go. Could this be that we're getting closer to Nibiru, or, you know?
That is possible. That is possible. That the sun drags the whole solar system hither and to.
Right.
And periodically we move. But whatever it is, seems to be happening every 3,600 years. Right. And take a look at what the magnetosphere is showing too. That there are charts. I think right now we have BATRUS, BATRUS, or something like that, and it shows that. And you have the magnetic solar wind coming from the sun, and it hits the Earth's magnetosphere and blows it away, so that it, instead of looking like this nice round thing, with circling out of the north and coming around to the south, it looks very strange. It has what they call a bow shock toward the sun, and then it blows away, outbound in lovely blues and reds and the like. Well, periodically we get a magnetic blast, and it's not coming from the sun. Sometimes NASA will say, "Oh, solar activity, here it comes," and then nothing happens. And then later, on a completely different day, all of a sudden, whammo, and the bow shock turns bright red, and everything, that's blown out into space is twirling and twisting and carrying on, and there's a hole a little bit to the south of the ecliptic on that bow shock. And of course Nibiru is rumored to come from Orion, which is a southern constellation, and coming in from the south, and indeed, this has been showing, and increasingly this is noticed there was a Themis spacecraft that showed this hole in the bow shock, and which NASA called a breach. I'm reading here, and we've had more blackouts. Electric trains sometimes are having problems. I hate to say it, but airplanes have problems, and all the static on the radio and the like. We're definitely having magnetic interference.
Well,
from the sun.
Yeah, well, I can tell you what. Matter of fact, we're under a geomagnetic storm right now. It's a weak one, but it's still happening.
Yeah.
Our magnetosphere has taken a hammering the last couple of years. I mean, it seems it's one thing after another, getting pulled one way or the other, and it's got to be weakening. And I know that it does weaken, and if it collapses, we're all in trouble. I mean, people don't understand that. If that collapses, we got space rock we got to worry about.
Yeah, but I don't think they do, Tim. Magnetic fields don't. If you have a magnetic field, you have a magnet. It doesn't just go. It can be bent. It can get pushed.
Yeah, right. I don't mean it collapses and is no longer there. I'm just saying it gets weak enough that it lets everything in.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that me and Andre have been working on, and we've been doing this for a couple of years, we've been noticing a pattern developing, how major disasters are occurring. What was it, Andre? Correct me if I'm wrong here. The moon gets closer to the Earth for a full moon, or new moon
enhances the earthquake intensities, and some of the major megaquakes have happened in or around major magnetic changes with the magnetosphere as well. So Nancy, for the past 3 years, we've been trying on the radio to tie that to the sun, and the sun is in a what's called a minimum right now. There's 11-year-ish cycle where it goes through a maximum and does a bit of a pole shift itself, and then goes to a minimum for the rest of the time. And we're in the minimum right now, which is confusing us because our theory is blown apart.
Not really, because we're still having geomagnetic storms, and they're weaker than usual, but they're still occurring.
Yeah.
I don't think we had a sun-spotless day in the last 2 years.
It doesn't seem to fit the normal and expected pattern, where you have, something happen with the sun, like an X-class flare, et cetera, it happens at other times, and then when they say, oh, we're going to have this and that happen from the sun, well, then nothing happens on Earth. It's like the timing is wrong. For instance, we had a very low sunspot decade, and the sun was virtually sleepy. This wasn't expected. Around the year 2000 or so, it was like, oh, it's going to be terrible. We're going to have a real, and it never happened. The sun went to sleep. To quote a 2009 article, the current solar minimum ranks third all time in the amount of spotless days, with 717 since 2004. And another quote, 2.5 years after solar minimum, the AP index remains below the minimum of previous solar cycles. So it was a very sleepy, no sunspot. And like you said, the activity is just not there to account for the magnetic whumping that we seem to be getting, right? Something else is causing that, right?
That's what I was leading to, was if Nibiru, and I'm probably mispronouncing this name, but if it's something that's coming towards us, or we're getting close to it, we're going to start to see a lot more drastic changes is what I would expect.
Yes. Yes.
The high tides going all the way to Kansas and stuff like that.
Yes.
Some type of extremes, and how do we prepare for that? How do we get ready for that?
Well,
that would be the biggest question.
Yeah, sloshing happens along the coastlines, and you can get. I mean, the worst case that I've ever heard of documented has been beluga whales up in 500 to 600 feet high in the St. Lawrence Seaway, up in the mountaintops, and they found the whale bones. And how did they get up there? Well, that had to have been a high tide, a wave, a tsunami type of thing, So obviously, but according to legend, this doesn't sneak up on people. They have plenty of time. You see this monster. Noah, for instance, the legends of the flood. Noah had, according to the Colburn, the Egyptian, had 2 years warning. 2 years. He noticed the moon moving too swiftly in the sky with orange tresses streaming behind it. Well, that's the reddish dust, right? The wobble got that bad, and he began to build, his ark, which really, of course, was not every animal 2 by 2 in the world. But,
right.
And it was his household and his domestic animals and blah, 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 But recently, talking about the wobble again, and I say people can measure it, they have something called Manhattanhenge, which is like Stonehenge in Manhattan. 15 years ago, this was always on May 28th, and you can stand in certain streets, and there's the sun down this street, and it's glorious between the buildings. And then it got weird, and it was maybe May 28th to 29th, 30th, 31st. We're not real sure yet. Well, this year, the sun never showed up at all. And it was because it had already set, because the wobble, the figure 8, happened so quickly that the sun set, and they couldn't capture it. And he said, oh, it was the clouds. But not so. You go to other years, and there's the sun amidst the clouds. So, and there wasn't even any clouds. I checked the weather maps. So what I'm saying is, you're going to have warning. You're going to be able to tell that something is coming soon, and when it does, just don't be on the coastlines. Don't be 500 to 600 feet. Be high or well inland, and people can do that. They will not be taken by surprise. That's my feeling.
Well, yeah, true. There's no way I'm leaving Arizona, so.
Well,
you don't have to worry. Yeah,
Arizona Bay.
Yeah, no kidding.
There's an interesting tool that I've found that Nancy and her team have put together. It's called Safe Location, based on the legend and the theory that.
Yes.
And again, this is Nancy's work, and it's not with Usaebn, but we're partnering up to get this information out there. If you want to look at it, it's called Safe Location. Nancy, you can tell about the website, but it will calculate the surges and the different fault lines and kind of give you an idea. You can look around you. We've talked about this on previous episodes with Nancy. You can look around your geology. If you see a lot of bluffs and a lot of fissures and open rock in your area, there's been movement there before. And if you're on a fault line, hopefully. But
yes.
Nancy, you can talk about the safe spots that
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's my website, zetatalk.com, zetatalk.com. On the left-hand side is a menu bar, and it says Safe Lokes, and you can go there. It's the predictions. For instance, for Arizona, yes, you're far enough away from the coastlines, but the Hoover Dam, if there was a big earthquake, would not hold. They had that in that movie San Andreas, dramatic breaking of it. If you take a look at the Colorado River coming down from the Hoover, there's a place just to the west of Phoenix where there's not a lot of high land, where the water, the land is low. A real rush of water would create a gusher coming toward Phoenix. So if you live in Phoenix, and it sounds like that's safer than can be, unless the Hoover Dam breaks. And that is, for instance, in the Safe Locations documentation as a vulnerability in Arizona. Other than that, you're fine.
Well, if the Hoover Dam breaks, there will be so much pandemonium.
Yeah.
So Phoenix will be gone, Tucson will be gone. That whole what we call the desert floor will be back underwater as usual.
Yeah.
I actually live up in the mountains just west of Phoenix, and my location, I'm about 5,000 feet, 4,800 feet, I think.
Oh, you're
above
good.
sea level. So I'm good.
You're good. Yeah.
And that was part of my disaster planning. Take a look around at what disasters could happen. And one of my scenarios was the Hoover Dam breaking or Palo Verde nuclear power plant going off. Where would be the safest spot in the state? And that's where I moved to.
Well, good for you. Another thing to be concerned about is earthquakes. Where some areas have it worse than others. But if earthquakes are going to happen, put up your tent. And I say if earthquakes, there are ways to predict earthquakes, and it's the screeching, the electromagnetic screech of the rock that drives domestic animals and pets crazy, and they run around and want to run away from home and the like. But if it gets to the point where you're seeing this big thing in the sky writhing in orange, you can anticipate magnitude 9 earthquakes all over the globe. Don't be in buildings that are going to fall on you. Be out in your tents. Be out in the country. We've had an increase in earthquake that is documentable, that you can see on the charts all over the globe. And it's not just the fault lines, and it's the jolts that affect everybody. So this Safe Locations information talks about your vulnerability from tsunami, earthquakes, sometimes rising and sinking lands. I think we have addressed that on one of our sessions. The scripted drama of the plates and how they're shaped, which ones go under, which ones right on top. You can figure from that whether you're going to go up or down. You don't, you're pretty safe outside. You're better off laying in a shallow trench during any of this from high winds as well as earthquake. I mean, how much damage can happen to you if you're 6 inches below the surface? You might get rolled back and forth. You might get scraped, but you're not going to get, broken.
Well, one of the biggest things about earthquakes and seismic activity, the majority of people who get injured or die, it's not from the fallen debris. It's usually the gas fires and the explosions that happen afterwards because the utilities do not get shut off in time. And if you're outside with an earthquake happening or a tornado, most natural disasters, your safest bet is outside because there's not much that's going to be able to hurt you. Tornadoes or hurricanes, a little bit different. You got debris flying. So a shelter is a good place. But honestly, the best shelter I've ever found is a natural shelter, and it's called a cave. The only thing you got to worry about is rock slides at that point.
Yeah, and it's true. If a cave has been there for how many eons, it's not likely to go away. But there is some danger. I mean, you have to be aware. You have to think, what if it collapses?
Right. So you have to have an emergency exit out.
Yeah. So our best recommendation is dig a shallow trench, perhaps 2.5 feet wide and 1.5 feet deep, and everybody lay down in that when the worst is about to happen, and then you won't get blown away. Nothing will fall on you. Even if the trees, fall, they will not go into the trench. They'll go crosswise, and that's kind of, and it's cheap. It's something that everybody can do. Talking about the weather going wild, we have something in the Arctic right now where the whole Arctic, wrap around the globe, seems to be burning. Siberia is having these big fires. Canada is aflame. Alaska has got forest fires, and it's like it's too dry, and it's just astonishing things that you thought would never burn that are. So there's, if you go around the Arctic, and this is the kind of thing because of our weird temperature swings, drought and deluge is swinging, and legend says when Nibiru returns, that's what you get.
Very interesting.
Well, there was something about some Chinese emperor 1,600 years before Christ. Well, that's 3,600 years ago. And snow came in summer, and the seasons were severe, is the way they put it. I don't have the poetry in front of me, but the bottom line is snow in summer, we are increasingly having that sort of thing, too. Right here in Wisconsin, Andre will confirm. How many mornings do I worry that maybe we're having a frost in July, and it could happen.
Right, worried about my plants, my survival garden.
Yes.
Yeah, to tent that up. I did see a report. I don't know, Nancy, maybe you can help me with confirmation on this. Maybe it was an old report, but I thought I saw a report in the last couple of days that they had a snowstorm in the Sahara, or maybe Saudi.
Yes, I remember Saudi had one, yes.
Yeah, they never
snow
Saudi.
in summer. Right. And it has been happening only in the last 5-7 years or so. Right. Yeah. And increasingly so. Right.
I noticed on some of the documentation you sent to us, Nancy, I know we're going a little bit long in the episode, but we have time left, and Tim actually had a question about this too. There's going back to that 3,600-year cataclysmic signatures that we were talking about on the last episode, I wanted to refresh. There's a Hopi reference in there, and I'm not sure if we talked about it on the show, if it was on the website, but one of the Hopi signs of a coming of a cataclysm was spider webs crossing the earth or crossing the sky. And part of the document you sent me for the show was would look like, I call them chemtrails, and maybe that's not the technical term, but it looks like crisscrossing of aerosols in the atmosphere. And,
yes, chemtrails. That's another thing that people are pointing to as part of a cover-up, because it crisscrosses, and it's not where planes, and they've actually caught private, wealthy people. It's been leaked. People have taken pictures and shown these planes outfitted with spraying under the wings, and also loaded with these tubs of spray material. And they're not the big planes. They're like private jet size, and they go crisscross, and then it disperses, and it creates a fogging. And what that does, in fact, is preventing people from seeing in the sky what some people are finding with a filter, because this is a red dust and a red planet. If you filter for the red spectrum, which you can do with the insert of a floppy disk, you can see things that you would normally, it blocks out everything else, and the red stuff comes through, and whoa. It's not just this object, that is kind of at the lower right-hand side of the sun, but all kinds of other trash and moons, and sometimes you get to see that object, and it looks like it's a double helix with the wings on either side. Mylar works also, and there's a webcam in Italy for the past almost a year now. Somebody in Germany has been able to capture images just at sunset, like 1700, 18, in other words, 5, 6 at night, And there it is. It's a little pink spot, and when you expand on that, every darn night, and sometimes it's got the double helix, and it's showing up, and people can actually capture this themselves. Many people have.
Nancy, I'm a skeptic on this one. I'm going to actually request, can you send me some information that you have on them getting caught with chemtrails?
Yeah, I do. I have. There was a video, and then the video got killed, but I captured some shots from that. Yes, it did.
Well, so
but now, of course, you have to say it could have been a complete hoax. Yes, it could have been. Right.
Here's the deal I have, and me and Andre were actually speaking about this earlier today. Right. I've been involved with the airline industry, aircraft, I should say, most of my adult life. And I have never seen, and I've seen some very peculiar aircraft, especially in the military, anything that would be spraying. Now, I've seen crop dusters and other pesticide machines, yes, but they serve a purpose, and they know about it. And the biggest thing I got about chemtrails, and I ask everybody who mentions chemtrails to me, I can't believe, and I'm having a hard time believing this part, that this conspiracy has gone on so long, and according to conspiracy theorists, is portrayed by so many, if not every aircraft, and no one knows about it, and no one's come forward to it. There's no way to keep that secret. You see what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, and I used to say that about a number of things, and then I encountered the information in the opposite direction, and I thought, holy cow, and sometimes it's money and sometimes it's intimidation, but my understanding from these reports that accompanied this leaked material is that it's the wealthy, very wealthy people, and they're using private jets, and they don't land at airports. They land in flat fields, and they run the plane into something like a barn, or a warehouse of some sort, so that it's out of the normal commercial airline, and they don't use regular pilots. It's private.
Now you got my law enforcement side up, and that's called illegal trading or illegal drugs.
Oh yeah, yes, it would be.
That's
right.
Smuggling somehow, something.
Yes, it is. It certainly sounds like it would be illegal, because in the first place, these are citizens that are getting dumped on. Well, when this was happening, and about 15, 20 years ago, the rumor was, it makes people sick, when they do this. Well, I had an occasion to talk to somebody when I lived in California. She worked, and she worked with me, but lived in Santa Cruz. And she was sick, for a few days, and I asked her about that because they had a rumored spraying around Santa Cruz, and she said, well, my neighbors didn't get sick, but I did. And I said, okay, you have a dog, yes? Do you walk your dog on the beach? Yes. And what about them? No, they don't. They stay in the house. So, it was a small confirmation, but it's that type of, and they would report that where there was spraying, people would come into the clinics, and kids would have the flu or something.
Right.
But there is no hard evidence, and you're quite right, Tim.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. First of all, I might know the government, but I don't believe them and trust them.
Well, I don't think it's the government doing that. I think it's wealthy people. Yeah. I know
in the past, back in the 70s, and I'm dating myself here, they had programs, especially where I live, that planes would come by and dust the whole town, and it was under the mosquito deterrence. So is the project, or can a project like this occur? Well, by all means, yes. I don't doubt it could happen.
Yeah.
I just doubt the validity of how could you keep it a secret? How could you, how could you fuel the conspiracy people so much and nothing solid has been proven?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'd like to jump in with the devil's advocate, and you might want to just go Google chemtrails and like look at the images for a while, because that's my personal opinion on this one. That's not normal traffic pattern.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, no, it might not be normal traffic patterns, but can cloud coverage be an excuse? I mean, honestly, I don't know. You know, I just find it hard to believe that they're doing something like this and no one's come through, whether you're rich or not. You know,
it seems like TMZ would pick that up, or Fox News or somebody. You know.
Yeah, you know, how many rich people have gone broke? Hey, if I'm a rich guy and I'm being paid to do chemtrails and I'm going broke, guess what I'm saying? You know, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's never been no hard evidence, and that's what the lack of hard evidence is what's gotten my curiosity saying, there's a flag here and something's wrong. What it is, I don't know, but you know, I'm not going to believe until I get to see the hard evidence.
Well, good for you, and I'll send you what I have.
Yeah,
and
please.
I have to admit, it was a video that was removed, and I thought it looked compelling, but I don't have hard evidence. This is true.
Okay.
But
it's good to be a skeptic.
Out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
question everything. Yes.
Yeah, we question everything.
Yes, and you should. Yeah.
Oh yeah. The biggest thing, and the one that I do want to come back and say, there's no right or wrong on these subject matters. It's all a theory.
Yes.
And just as much as the theory of the moon evolution that we take for fact, it's not. It's still a theory.
Yes.
You know, and we got to stress this is the working theory, and it can change tomorrow. It can change tonight, and who knows? You know, but it's still a theory. It's what we think, what our logic mind says, and now we're going to find the evidence.
Yes, exactly. Just remember, a few hundred years ago, the Earth was flat. You know, and
well, I heard someone say the other day that there's still people out there who believe the world's flat.
Yes, there are.
They're called Earth flatness or flatliners or something.
No, they're called idiots.
No, it's true. It's true. It's an organization. They still believe it. Yeah.
Wow.
So definitely think it through. You know, seek your own information. Rely on your own discernment.
Definitely.
Oh yes. And
if you want to look more into it, Nancy has two websites. The other one that I mentioned earlier, not only ZetaTalk.com, which is great, but also more about Earth changes and actual evidence and reports of volcanoes, sinkholes. The magnetosphere images are there. The SOHO images are there. The daily webcam images are there. Look at it and look for yourself. That's what we say. And then research everything before you believe anything. And it's called poleshift.ning.com. It's called Earth Changes in the Pole Shift on the Facebook. So
yes, thank you, Andre. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Nancy, I want to thank you for being part of the network and coming on as a regular guest. You keep us on our toes. I like that.
Oh, and I have to return the compliment, Tim. You keep me on my toes, and that's a good thing.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Well, thanks you guys for the great discussion, and thanks again, Nancy, for being a part of our show. This will be available as a podcast, and I believe you're going to do another YouTube for your
I do.
For your,
I pop them up
on
my channel. I do. Yes. Thanks so much, guys, for having me.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah. Good night,
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Bye. Well, that's all the time we have for SitPrep, Situation Preparedness, for this week. Tim, you're still on live. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it. We had discussed before the show some questions, and also some questions that came up in the chat room. And we only do a monthly segment with Nancy because she's very busy with her other websites and tracking all this information. But we try to present as a network both sides to it. So thanks, Tim, for helping us out with that, and keeping it a little bit more real. We want to separate Usaebn from those other networks out there that are just doing it for advertising. We do it to get the information out. So thanks, Tim.
All right, thank you.
You've been listening to Situational Preparedness here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. You can find this download available on our 24-hour radio stream, usaebn.org, and also on the Nancy site on YouTube. We'll share it on the Facebook as well. Thanks for listening. Catch us on our Facebook, USAEBN, and usaebn.org.